I think a lot of things always do, but the biggest sticking point we see today is looking at a lot of trends, be they natural, organic, CBD. They all seem to be evolving within the context of families forming later and having kids later. So what you're seeing today is that somebody in their 30s or something that's having their first child, hypothetically, what they've done, they've been an adult for 10 or 15 years now by the time they're having kids. So rather than a 20-something who's been an adult for a year or two and then basically going back and doing what their mom did to raise their kids, they're trying to bring their adult sensibilities to families. And I think this is why a lot of these more natural trends are sticking, because they're sticking post-parenthood. So be it organics, natural, fake meat as we're calling it here, I think all of these things have much more staying power when older moms are able to bring this lifestyle to their kids and to their family.
Older parents are feeding their kids oat milk and fake meat burgers?
Yes, as opposed to just having it themselves and giving their kids and giving their kids something more natural, or get less natural, yes.
When we take a look at the example of Dean Foods, Alexia, because the interesting thing about Dean Foods is that it did have White Wave at one point in time, which was the alternative milk section of the business. It spun that out. Should we look at this as sort of, this is what's going to happen in this industry to meat versus fake meat?
Oh, I think that's way too early to really call that kind of a transition. I think what we're going to see over the next 10 years is that plant-based meats are going to develop rapidly. We've got them at about 5% of the market today. We think that they could go to 15% of the market over the next 10 years. That would be very much the way that the plant-based beverages have developed. That would be a $40 billion market, so that's already a very good start here in the U.S., and it could be just as big.
How do you get that number?
That's basically 15% of the $270 billion meat market in the U.S. today.
So let me ask a couple of questions here. Number one is this. Is it necessarily true that the winners in these transitions will be the upstarts, the disruptors, or is it possible, or maybe even probable, that the major large food processing companies will disrupt themselves before they get disrupted? They'll go and they'll buy the little guys and embrace them. What's the game?
Well,
here?
White Wave's a good benchmark since Dean Foods spun it out and it promptly got bought by Danone. And that's a good example of how that can play itself out. I do think there is something to the idea that at scale, food companies that know how to produce at scale can bring techniques to scaling some of these businesses like they did in organics. I think the other big piece of this to keep in mind are that the large retailers that sell food, other things being equal, like working with big companies because they've got more resources to help them, and that may help that as well. And then the big retailers, I think, can also make some interesting choices here as well.
Yeah, and I think when you think about the meat market, there's lots of different subsegments in meat. If you think about burgers or breakfast sausage or meatballs, and I think what's going to end up happening is you're probably going to end up with 3 to 5 different brands in each subsegment that end up winning out. Yeah. So that at the moment, there's plenty of room for everybody.
So question 2 is, I had my first Impossible Burger.
Oh, how was it?
It was okay. I mean, it was okay. There was more bun and other stuff than burger.
But you didn't have a plain to actually have the pure
No, I should have done that. I
experience.
should have had the really plain thing. And I think I take your point that maybe older individuals or building families who are aware of diet and so on and so forth are turning this way. But what's the evidence here? Are these products, whether they are soy-based, almond-based, oat-based, are they necessarily better for you? Is the Impossible Burger or the plant-based burger necessarily better for you than a plain old meat burger? Because there's a lot of processing in these foods.
So I think there's 3 criteria. I think there's 3 criteria for wanting to buy plant-based meats. There's the health angle, there's the animal welfare angle, and then there's the climate angle. I think with the animal welfare, clearly better. Climate, clearly better. Health, a little bit tougher. They are heavily processed. They've got more complicated ingredient lists. They do have no cholesterol, which is a legitimate claim relative to red meat. And they are not red meat if you happen to be an older person that's trying to avoid that explicitly. So I think there's a market for it, but it's not necessarily that compelling on the health side.
What was that thing that you said, the 3 things? That's very interesting. So, the climate.
Animal welfare.
Animal welfare, okay.
And then health and wellness.
Right.
Yeah.
And from our data, over 70% of shoppers will say that things like ethical treatment of animals, non-testing on animals are either extremely or somewhat important to them when they're making choices about what they buy. So I do think there is something to, even if it's not necessarily proven to be healthier for me, if it's healthier for animals and healthier for the world, shoppers are very interested in it.
All that said, Alexia, you recently upgraded Beyond Meat. You're at an outperform now. You initiated, I believe, at a market perform. Was that it?
Initiated an outperform, then
downgraded it,
yep.
and then got it back up to an outperform. Part of the catalyst in terms of Beyond Meat stock is announcing all of these different partnerships with various QSRs. And recently, Burger King had said that it was going to tap Unilever to do its fake meat offering in Europe. These guys don't need a Beyond Meat, do they? I mean, to Tyler's point, I mean, if that's going to be a main catalyst for the stock near term, they can eliminate that entirely. Why be beholden to the pricing of Beyond Meat when they can just sort of develop their own product with somebody else?
I think it's all going to be about who is the front runner in terms of the taste and texture. And I really think that Beyond Meat has got really way ahead of the game on the breakfast sausage side of things. I think they've got a very good product when it comes to the burger side of things. And also, Impossible can't go over to Europe, which I think is going to be a very big market because the concerns about climate are much bigger over there. So I think if you're going to have 2 or 3 winners in each subsegment, Beyond could be one of those front runners. Look at Chobani. Chobani is still standing in Greek yogurt, and they're still independent.
Right.
Okay.
Alexia, you have better answers than Alexa. Okay, let's just say that. I really, yeah. You answered the question.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the weather going to be like tonight?